Hello, and welcome back to
the Chili Grits
Podcast. We are so excited to be here once again. My name is Reverend Manikka Bowman.
And I am Dr. Aisha Francis.
And we're elated because, this is episode 3.
Yes.
And we did a soft launch and shared with our friends and family and had a more public launch on Valentine's Day.
Little sweet reminder. It was a sweet release on Valentine's Day.
Yes, indeed. And so we are so grateful for all of the initial feedback that came in. People are really excited about Chili Grits Podcast, as excited as we are.
Yes, it's landing well. We're so pleased.
Yes, it's hitting where it needs to hit.
Yes.
So and I have to say that when we did get some feedback, it was brought to our attention that we didn't quite explain chili grits.
No, we did not. There's some inside language, inside baseball that folks wanted a little bit of explanatory notes. We needed some liner notes.
Yes. So some people thought we were talking about chili
As
that you
in
actually eat.
the stew,
Yes.
chili. Other folks thought we were talking about chili the spice.
Yes.
So
Aisha,
yes.
Can you tell us, what does chili grits mean?
So chili grits is this mashup of, first, a nod to the location where we find ourselves. We are recording in Cambridge.
Yes.
Shout out to CCTV. Thank you for the space and for all of the technical help. And I think also this sense of the climate metaphorically in this part of the country, where people often feel that interactions with people are literally cold.
That's true.
And that folks are cool to new relationships, new interactions.
Yes.
So that's where the chili came from. Actually, in one of the iterations was cold grits.
Yes, cold grits. And we were like, I'm not
That's
sure.
a little harsh.
Cold would work.
Yes.
And also, of course, it's cold.
Yes.
It is very cold compared to where we grew up.
Right. So that's the chili part. And then we were really thinking about the grits first as a nod to this Southern staple. If folks haven't had the popular hot cereal grits, go get you some grits.
Get
you
some
can
grits in your life.
Find it at the grocery store. The good old Quaker kind, or whatever brand you find. It's delicious.
But here in the Northeast, you do have to look for it.
You do. It's usually at the bottom.
Yes,
it's at the bottom
it's not
shelf.
readily available.
It is on the cereal aisle. I'm just explaining this to
Yes.
people. It's on the regular cereal aisle. Go to the section with the hot cereals where you find your oatmeal and cream of wheat, cream of rice, cream of buckwheat, all of that stuff. Grits are there.
It takes some work.
It might be on the bottom shelf, and
Yes.
there's only a few types. Whereas if you go in the South, they literally have an entire section of all these types of grits.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we digress.
Yes.
So there's the food grits, and then there's also this acronym, which is Girls Raised in the South. And growing up, you could just go different places, any kind of souvenir shop or Opryland, and there's all of this merchandise that has grits all over it, literally, GRITS. And it's just fun. It's a fun thing. So that's where the mashup derived. Yes. It was this iterative creative process. So there you have it. That's chili grits,
That's
folks.
chili grits.
Now
and
everybody's in the know.
They're in the know, and maybe when summer comes, we'll warm the grits up. But for right now, they're chili.
It's chili.
It is really chili.
Grits. Yes. So, Manikka, what is today's saying?
Today's Southern saying. Okay, so it's going to be a pearl clutcher, right? Mm-hmm. So where I grew up, there was this term that would kind of roll around when you didn't properly acknowledge someone when you walked into a room.
Okay.
And so the term was, did I sleep with you last night?
Woo.
So I remember as a child, people would say this, and it was before I understood that it was like a metaphor, right? And I would just get all anxious and nervous because I had no clue what people were talking about.
How do I respond to this? Help. What is the proper response?
Yes. And then there would be a follow-up, like, speak to me when you walk into a room. So at the core of the saying, it's really about how do you acknowledge another person when you walk into a room and you don't know them, right? Or you haven't been around them, or it's a new environment, which is interesting because in the South, people, when you walk past somebody on the street, what do you do, Aisha?
There's a lot of greeting going on.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
smile,
acknowledgments.
You acknowledge.
Head nods. It
Yes.
could be, a little wave, an audible hello.
Yes.
But
yes.
but there is some kind of recognition that
Yes.
I see you.
Yes. And I think at the core of the saying, did I sleep with you last night? Which is very, it's there has a shock value to it.
It does. That one's a little naughty.
Yes, there's a shock value to it. It really forces an individual or a person to think about how they interact with people when they step into a room. So, I think about this in the context of our U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Marcia Fudge, right?
Secretary Fudge.
Yes, I remember her first press conference, right? And she walked in the conference room and she said, good evening. And it was like complete silence, right? And then she picked her head up, popped it up, and said, excuse me, good evening. And then everybody straightened their back up, and you heard everyone speak about it.
Yep.
So what was interesting for me in that moment, I chuckled because the first thing that came to mind for me when I heard it was this saying, did I sleep with you last night?
No, she commanded everybody's attention in that moment and this call and response expectation. I think she referred to her history as a teacher and said, I'm waiting for the response and for this participation in the kind of practice of relationship building.
Absolutely.
So this is a fun example because it's another one that honestly I had never heard of.
Really?
No, I'd never heard of this in that context. And, when you shared it, I don't even remember. I should have written down my first assumption of the connotation of the phrase because it wasn't this. So I love it. I love really kind of proving out the point, which is why we started this, that there's just expansiveness of language in Southern traditions and Southern sayings. So, but I definitely remember that press conference and the clip that went viral.
Yes, it did. And so what was interesting about the viral clip, and I encourage people to go back and pull it up.
Yes.
When I looked in the comments, I saw the phrase. There were so many people who are like, oh yeah, I know that. Did I sleep with you last night? Did I sleep with you last night?
How dare you not speak to me?
Yes.
But it also presumes that in our households that people have, even in that basic four walls, right? And understanding that you're speaking to each other as soon as you get up, before you leave the house. I'm going to assume that everybody does, and maybe people don't. Maybe people don't necessarily, the first thing we say in our household when we greet each other is, hey, good morning. How did you sleep last night? That's just part of it. And so anyway, I'm curious about whether or not that part of the phrase in and of itself even resonates, because some folks might say, well, even if I did sleep with you last night, I may or may not
speak to
you in the
particularly
morning.
if we got into a fight last night.
Right. But I do love the sassiness of it.
Yeah. So what's interesting for me at the core of the phrase and underneath it, it's this desire to be seen and to be heard. And so that's the piece once you get past the shock value and the funniness of it all. And, for those people that heard the phrase and their minds went multiple places, come on back.
It's sassy, not risqué.
It's not risqué. Yeah. But what's important for me is this piece of being seen and being heard. And I think that is a core common experience that just manifests differently based on where you are in life or what region of the country or the world you come in. Everyone has this deep desire to be seen and to be heard.
Right.
Right. And so growing up in a Southern context for me, where this phrase was very much a part of my formative years, it was really teaching me at a younger age, how do you acknowledge and affirm another human being? And, it's interesting. I think about that in the context of leadership, right?
Yes.
And I think about these moments when maybe I didn't get the affirmation. And there was actually, this story where it was this job and it was just going downhill quickly too. And I'll never forget, I got the news that my whole department was being let go of. But it was just a 2-person office. And I'll never forget that when they announced it, there was this huge write-up of the person that led the department. And a part of that was rightfully so. The person had been at the company a lot longer. But for me, I was literally at the bottom of this public announcement, and it was like 1 or 2 sentences. And I remember reading that, and I'm like, oh my God, like, this is horrible.
Dismissive.
It was so dismissive. And I'm like, okay, how do I tap into this piece of myself where I want to be viewed and seen and heard, right? So my response to that, I had this beautiful coworker that like held me in the moment of like my hurt. And she was like, you know what, Manikka, you're about to run for public office in Cambridge. Respond all to the email, because it went out company-wide, right? And leverage your talking points in your campaign to talk about why you're moving on and what's ahead for you.
That's smart.
And that's what I did. And you know what, Aisha? I got so many responses back saying, oh my God, I never met you before, but this is truly inspiring.
I love it.
And so, I think about that phrase, right? Did I sleep with you last night?
When I think about these rituals of greetings and how we greet each other, I'm curious about one thing that I have completely let go of now, but it was, I don't want to say hard, it was awkward for me to do for a while. It's the use of ma'am and sir.
Oh, yes.
And I wondered for a long time, whether or not, so here, very few people ever use that term. Although, interestingly, just before this recording, I went to a local place right next door, picked up a little bite, and the person said, thank you, ma'am. And he said, an older gentleman, he said, oh, I'm sorry, I mean, miss, I'm trying to stop myself from saying ma'am. So it was just an interesting exchange. But that was really ingrained in my upbringing, was to say ma'am and sir to everybody.
Yeah, same here.
All of the time. And it wasn't about subservience. It was just that sign of respect. And I think in a lot of cultures of color, there is this sense that everyone is an auntie or an uncle, auntie so-and-so, uncle so-and-so. And while we didn't have that tradition, the only aunties and uncles were either my biological ones or people who were super close to the family, so that they felt like aunts and uncles. But there was a very clear expectation of the ma'am and the sir. What about you?
Yeah, I actually remember when I decided to stop using it.
It was conscious, though.
It was.
See?
It was.
Me too.
It was very conscious.
I had to make myself stop.
Yeah, it was. I graduated from high school. I went to Washington, D.C. to stay with my godmother for that summer before I went off to college, right? So I got this job it's called Fashion Bug.
Ooh, I worked at Hit or Miss.
Did you?
I think it's similar. Yes. I remember
when it was fashion before like the term was used,
Yeah.
So I was there, and like the people that were my supervisors were like, I don't know, 25, and I was 17 because, I didn't turn 18 until my first semester of college.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, I was young, right?
I was like, we were young freshmen.
Yes, we were. So I remember saying yes, ma'am to them and felt awkward.
Like, something about this don't feel right.
It's not hitting.
Just because you're my manager doesn't mean I have to actually call you ma'am.
Yeah. And so I remember at that moment I stopped using it. And but then when I went to college, I picked it up based on what someone's age was.
Oh, okay. All
So
right. Yeah,
I
that's a good cutoff.
Yeah, I was very nuanced. And then, I kept going up the coast and landed here in, the Cambridge, Boston, the hub. And I just stopped using it altogether. Yeah. But what's interesting, Aisha, when we talk about, this concept of how do we greet and acknowledge each other, I think about my graduate school experience. And I went to an HBCU for my undergrad, but I went to a PWI, as they call it.
Yes. Okay, we should do the liner notes for these too.
Yes.
So
yes.
HBCU is a historically black college or university.
Yes.
PWI is predominantly white institution.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Aisha.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We're gonna do them. That's a
Yes.
whole decision too. Code Switch has a wonderful episode of their podcast on liner notes. They don't call them liner notes, like explanatory notes.
Yes.
Do we do them? Do we not? Well, we're going to be inclusive.
We're
going to try to remind each other to do them. So.
Yes, be intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm one to not like acronyms because it makes an assumption that everybody knows your acronym.
That's
and
right.
that's not the
and
case.
I want more people to know about HBCUs and what they
Indeed.
are. So,
Indeed.
all right. So you're HBCU, and we'll talk about mine later. But
Yes.
anyway, we digress. Your story.
Yes. So I go to Columbia Theological Seminary.
That's the PWI.
That's
y'all.
the PWI.
Okay.
It was it was my theological training place. And so what was fascinating to me, all the professors wanted me to call them by their first name.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like,
I've never been comfortable with that.
I was so uncomfortable
I
with
know,
that. But
I
like
know,
my colleagues that were white,
It was fine.
no problem. None.
Yep.
They were just
Didn't bat an eye.
It was I'm like,
I
what?
know.
I felt like I was in the Matrix.
Yeah.
But what was fascinating to me, there were professors of color on the campus, and we never had the conversation. But when you see and without having the conversation,
Yes.
what the thing
What they've
is,
been through.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I could just tell that it just kind of it kind of ate away at some piece of themselves, because culturally that is not how, particularly in the African American tradition, I'm pretty sure there's other traditions out there too, or ethnic groups that don't do that in the same way.
Right.
But I could tell it didn't sit
It
well.
didn't sit. I was
yeah,
gonna
but
say
they
just
had to
didn't sit well.
accept it
Because that was the culture of the
that
institution.
that was the culture of the institution.
Yeah.
And so, this whole piece around, navigating how you greet someone, how you want to be greeted, right? And what does that mean in cultural context, in each one that you have to move throughout is really significant. And what are we willing to hold on to? And what are the things that we are willing to walk away, right? And so for the story I told at my job, I was like, I was not willing to walk away from my contributions to that organization, not being fully acknowledged, from me not being seen as the dynamic person that I was, despite the circumstances. And I think we all have to do that, right?
And I think that was a way for you to take back the power in a moment where, I mean, deliberately or not, I think someone should have realized, hey, this can make someone feel small. I think that was a very egregious sort of, even if you just look at the real estate, that you spent, let alone, somebody always has to go first. So it's not so much about that, but I think, the real estate that you spend on messaging makes a big difference. But I think what I loved about the way that Secretary Fudge handled that moment is that she commanded the room, and she asked for the type of opening that she wanted and expected. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to be more cognizant of is how you set the tone for conversations, how you set the tone as a leader when you walk into a meeting. And you can feel when spaces are funky, and who knows why that is.
Right,
It most of the time it has absolutely nothing to do with you. But what you can do is, with a simple adjustment like hers, you can really reorient folks
Absolutely.
to a better way, I think, or something that feels better, right, in terms of respect and expectations for exchange and a dialogue. And I think that is a way of being a much more really a bold leader, but also just someone who is very clear about the way you want to interact with folks instead of moving past these openings. I think it is a practice that I do want to, pay more attention to how you open a meeting. How do you greet a room when you walk into it? How do you, attack a space in a way that I think helps you put your best foot forward as a leader. And so I do think that was an important moment for her early in, having an important role to kind of set this expectation for, hey, I bet you a lot of other people know now, listen, when Secretary Fudge
walks in the
room, you better greet her, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
There's a way you can teach people how you want to be treated with something like that, with a little exchange like that. So I think there's a kernel of truth in that moment.
It's the "did I sleep with you" moment.
Oh, you know what? Let's go back. Let's take it back. Rewind. Do you like your grits with sugar or salt?
Oh, we're talking about how we like our grits.
Yes, we got to do that since we're having, the kind of explanatory note conversation. We might as well just do all of it.
Yes, indeed. So I am a with salt and butter person. When I moved over to Florida and got closer to the Carolinas is when I started adding a little shrimps to the grits.
Yes.
But honestly, in Louisiana, I would say grits, it's a part of the cuisine, but it's definitely not the center. Like we have like the Holy Trinity. Are you familiar with this term?
It is. Wait a minute, let me see. It's celery.
Yes.
I know what this is. Celery, onions, and carrots.
No.
What? No. It's celery, onion, and bell pepper?
Yes, okay. And peppers.
That was close.
And so, like, all those types of, like, savory type dishes,
yes.
The jambalaya, the gumbo, I think that's more of the center, but grits is definitely a part of it, but it's definitely not the center of our cuisine.
So I had grits, oatmeal, or cream of wheat every single morning.
Wow.
I was a hot cereal girl. It was a hot cereal household. So I grew up on this all the time. The only way I ever had it was savory. This whole thing about sugar in the grits, I honestly have never had it. But what I did used to put sugar on was rice
Sugar and rice?
I know, because rice is nothing but straight up starch anyway. But yes, I would put sugar and butter in my rice until one day my grandmother literally said, "Girl, you are too old to be eating your rice like that."
Thanks, Grandma.
She shamed me out of it. I was like, really? It's like, that's for kids. So I stopped. But yes, but I similarly, as I grew older and started traveling, is when I was introduced to fish and grits or shrimp and grits. We didn't grow up with that. It was just the grits itself as a breakfast meal. Never had it for lunch. Never had it for dinner. So anyway, but yeah, it was definitely a staple in the household. And it's hearty soul food for me. And I eat it quite frequently.
Yeah, I don't have it as much as I should. But I feel like, honestly, with a lot of Southern cuisine, I have to force myself to cooking in the house and really make sure that I keep it as a staple. But I think that it has more to do not with me being in the Northeast. It's just like, who has time for cooking?
But they are so fast. They're done in like grits 3 minutes. That's why I make it up every, I am still trying to keep with the hot cereal tradition in the household. Do your girls eat grits?
No, don't judge me. No, don't judge me.
I have one who eats them and one who won't. So no judgment zone, judgment-free zone here. But
I'm going to introduce it to them this weekend.
See what happens.
Yes.
It's like, listen, folks, listen. We want you to just have a sense of what this is. So, all right. Well, thank you for introducing me to a new phrase, a new turn of phrase.
Yes. Yeah. And so the next time you're in a room, of course, you'll do it in the most professional way possible, right? But if someone does not give you the acknowledgement you deserve, that's just for, of course, Dr. Francis, but anyone that is listening, you can conjure up the spirit of, did I sleep with you last night? And get the respect that you rightfully deserve.
Put some respect on your name.
Yes.
Love it. There you have it.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Chili Grits Podcast. We are so excited about this work, and we hope that you appreciate our work too. And let us know, have you heard of this phrase before?
Yes. Has it come up in the lexicon?
Yeah.
And, how has it impacted you? And if you've just heard it, give us some feedback on what you think.
And if you decide to drop it and use it, let us know how it turns out.
Please do. Did you get the Marsha Fudge treatment?
Yes.
And how did it go over? We want to know.
All right.
Until next time.
Until next time.